welcome back. We're here live at E3 2017 at the Shacknews booth. I'm here with Kevin Carthew from Team17. You're the creative director of the Escapists 2.
I'm not the creative director of the Escapists 2, I'm the creative director at Team17.
Oh, at Team17, the whole company. Oh my goodness. They sent a celebrity. So you're going to show us the Escapists 2.
That's right.
And talk a bit about it. So what's sort of the driving force behind Escapists 2? When you wanted to make another Escapists, what was like the goal that you wanted to accomplish?
So how we got our start with designing the Escapists 2, we spent a lot of time working with the community on this one. The Escapists was a great game for fostering a sense of community around it because it's a sandbox game about breaking out of prison. The ways that you can break out of prison are like incredibly varied and multifaceted. And because the gameplay is that varied, what's cool about that is that there's something genuinely interesting about going onto the forums and reading about how people actually manage to escape, because no two games of the Escapists are really the same. The ways that you can escape have a lot of variety in them, and it's kind of cool to read about, you know, that suspiciously thin bit of fence somewhere that somebody managed to tunnel under, or this powerful weapon that somebody managed to craft and it changed the game for them. So it's got a thriving community around it. We spent a lot of time listening to what the community was saying. Right at the start of development, right at the start of pre-production as well, we also surveyed the community and we were asking, you know, what kind of things did you like about it? What would you like to see in the future? And time again, the message that we were hearing was, you know, this game would be amazing if it had multiplayer support. So the big new feature for the Escapists 2 really is the multiplayer, but we've also spent an awful lot of time just making more of absolutely everything that people loved about the original game as well.
And is the multiplayer co-op or competitive? Are you trying to break out with people or against people?
It's both. It's both. So we have two multiplayer modes. We have a co-op mode and we have a versus mode. If I get into the game a little bit, I can show you all about it.
Definitely.
I can tell you a lot more about it as well. We've taken a really interesting approach to multiplayer for this game. So let me try and do my best to play and talk at the same time.
Yeah, this is the challenge mode.
So the prison that we're going to look at is a prison called Rattlesnake Springs. This is a Wild West themed prison. What's interesting about the Escapists 2 is that, I mean, as well as the game being incredibly complex and feature rich, it also has a lot of content in it, and each of the prisons really come in different shapes and sizes. They take place in different locales. They offer the player unique challenges, different ways of escaping, unique items. They have different characters in them, etc, etc. This prison that we're going to look at in the demo we're looking at today, this will be about the third prison in the main game, Wild West themed prison. If I just start a game here, this will be familiar to players of the original game. So before you go into the game, these are all the guards and all of the inmates that will appear in the prison. You can name these, you can change how they look. We have more customization items in this game, so you can change their skin tones, you know, the shape of their face, their hairstyle. You can accessorize them, etc, etc. You can randomize that so it can be different each time. This button here sets the play mode, so that's setting what kind of multiplayer game or whether we'll play a single player game. I'll get back to that in just a minute. But yeah, let's get started in Rattlesnake Springs. So I'll start the game here. A little bit of a pause while we load into the game. What you will see when the game starts is each prison really starts with an introductory sequence. No, actually, that's not entirely true. Each prison starts with me picking my escapist, so picking my character. So the player gets to customize their own character. The game doesn't necessarily have much in the way of a narrative. You are entirely playing as yourself. You are the escapist trying to bust out of prison. Each prison starts with this little overview. So this is kind of an introduction to the prison. Prisons themselves are designed levels, broad kind of like sprawling complex affairs with lots of different rooms in them. When the player starts the game, they go through a period of really just exploring the prison, getting the lay of the land, understanding the environment. So here the warden is really showing us around the prison. In this prison the warden is a sheriff, and all the guards are kind of like cowboys. All the inmates are dressed up in like prison fatigues, like that classic like black and white striped hoop uniform. And here the warden's showing us around, describing Rattlesnake Springs to us, showing us the various points of interest, and he's saying, this is where you'll come to eat, this is where you come to exercise, this is where roll call takes place. Because the game is so open and it's so varied, each one of these intro sequences also kind of ends on with the warden satellite giving you a bit of a clue as to how you might escape. So here the warden is saying, by the way, this prison is built on top of a disused mine, kind of like gives you an idea as a player that if you were to dig underground, you might be able to use those mine tunnels to escape, for example.
Right. So the level of technology available to you kind of differs based on which stage you pick, I assume. Like, you're not going to create like a laser gun in the Wild West, probably.
Yeah, that's entirely correct. Yeah, so between the prisons, between the various stages, I mean, there is a lot of overlap in the kind of things that you'll be doing, the items that you can craft, the items that you have available to you to enact your escape. But yeah, you're right, you wouldn't get a laser gun in Rattlesnake Springs. And also in the other prisons you wouldn't have things like sheriff's badges and spurs, right, etc. But there is a lot of overlap between the items, but yeah, each prison has something fresh and unique about it.
And so how would, are you playing multiplayer right now? Is this multiplayer?
I'm playing single player right now.
Okay, how would multiplayer change this experience that you're doing right now?
Okay, so what I think is, I'm really proud actually of the approach that we took to multiplayer. I think it's quite a unique approach that we've taken to multiplayer. And it had to be a unique approach because the Escapists is quite a unique game. You know, in the history of games development, I can only think of a small handful of games that actually have this theme, you know, games that are actually about breaking out of prison. Because the game is so unique, when we surveyed players of the original game, sometimes what we found about how they played the game was actually kind of surprising. So you get the guys who would play it and they would sort of speed run, and what they would be interested in doing would be busting out of prison in the shortest amount of time possible. And then you get some people, especially like the younger members of the Escapist audience, they were kind of like almost like institutionalized in the prison. And what they liked about the game wasn't really speed running or, you know, busting out in the fastest time. They kind of like, because it's a sandbox game, because it's an open-ended sandbox game, they kind of just played it like you would play a sandbox game. They liked hanging out in the prison, they liked hanging out in the sandbox, they liked doing the side quests, maybe getting in the combat missions, playing the mini games, etc, etc. So some people really weren't kind of like goal focused. They weren't like, you know, the escape wasn't the be all and end all for them. It wasn't their priority. So whatever approach we took to the multiplayer,
and then eventually they made it out of the prison. Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, well, one day you have to spend a bit of time, then they eventually made it out. But what it meant was that the approach that we took to multiplayer had to accommodate all these different play styles. Yeah,
sure.
It couldn't just accommodate the speedrunners. It couldn't just accommodate the new competitive mode. It had to also work for the guys who just like to hang out. So what we've kind of come up with is essentially any single player game can become a multiplayer game at any point in time, and then any multiplayer game at any point in time can then also go back to being a single player game. You play through your prison, you play through your escape, you plan your escape, and other players can just drop in and drop out as they see fit. That's really kind of like malleable in terms of how you want to configure it, because we have both local split screen couch co-op play, and then also we have online play as well. So when you play the game split screen, it's quite a seamless experience. It's as simple as, if you had a pad right now and you wanted to help me bust out of prison, you could just press the A button. What you would see is the screen splits immediately. My game wouldn't be interrupted in any way, shape or form. I can just get on with what I'm doing, I can continue playing. You pick a character and then you just join my prison, and then we're working together in a co-op fashion to both try and bust out of prison together. So the screen will split up to 4 ways. At the same time, the game also supports any configuration of online players as well. If I just open the game menu, this button that I said I'd come back to, which sets the game mode, I can just hit that up and I can set my mode to be local as it is now, that's offline. Public or private. If it's private, that means the prison can go online and I can invite other players in to join with me from my friends list. If it's public, it just means it's open up to anybody. It like becomes a room. You can get random people joining you. Everyone can kind of join the prison. We can start a game as a local game. Let's say me and you are playing couch co-op. We're playing together. I don't know, you've come around my house or something. I'll invite you around for dinner. and we're like, let's have a bit of the Escapists, right? So we might sort of like work away on our prison. Let's say we've made a lot of progress. We've got a good thing going on. We spent a lot of time tunneling underground. We've got the guards tied up somewhere. We've got all of the tools that we need to bust out our escape. But for whatever reason, we need to go our separate ways. So our couch co-op session ends. Later on, then I could invite you back as an online player, and we could pick up where we left off and get going that way. Add more friends if we're struggling. Invite random people in to help us out. Kick them out again if we get sick of them. However the player wants to play, it's entirely down to them.
So you mentioned that any single player can become multiplayer and vice versa, multiplayer can become single player. So if I were to jump into your game online and then jump back offline, would I take your progress with me, or would I need to rejoin you specifically to continue playing in Rattlesnake Springs? Yeah.
Nicely remembered. So the approach that we took is that we don't want it to be like a negative or unfulfilling experience for anyone. So if you were in my game and I kicked you out, you don't get like a dialogue box that says, you know, connection lost or anything like that. You
Sure.
can keep your progress, you can continue playing. It's almost like I've left your game all of a sudden. The prisons would just branch, you can continue playing, I can continue playing in my prison. If you put a big time investment into it, you can like take a copy of the save, you can continue with that progress, you wouldn't lose any of your progress. So we've gone to great pains to make sure that the game remains open and accessible and is fun for as many people as possible, essentially.
And you can't kick people if they're being a problem. I don't know how you'd be a problem in co-op. Has there been like people trolling each other in co-op in your playtest?
I mean, I guess you can. I mean, as I said, we have two
It's a classic element of online play.
Yeah,
so,
of course, yeah. So we have two different play modes. So there's the cooperative mode, and the cooperative mode is absolutely best enjoyed with friends, yeah, because the Escapists is, I mean, despite the fact that it's, you know, it's got fairly simple looking graphics. I mean, it's a charming game, but it looks like a retro game on the surface, right?
Right.
That kind of like doesn't speak to the fact that the game is actually like incredibly complex under the hood. It has a lot of features. So in terms of that, like, we split the game up. The co-op and the single-player game is the long-form version of the game with all the complexity. That's
Right.
where it's best enjoyed with friends. It requires a lot of communication between players. The versus mode is the competitive aspect of the game. Those games are much shorter. And when you're talking about trolling, the versus mode is where we absolutely encourage the trolling. And the versus mode is almost a continuous troll of each other player from start to finish.
So how does that work in versus? Are you trying to stifle the other person's escape progress?
Yeah,
basically?
yeah.
How does that work?
I mean, all the way through, that's what people do. So, I mean, how it works is, I mean, it keeps all of the same features, it has all of the same content, we don't really change the game too much, you're playing in the same prisons, but specifically for the versus mode, the prisons are rebalanced to allow the players to escape in a shorter amount of time. So, some of the prisons, for example, in single player or co-op, can literally take hours to escape from. Big time investment, you have to play very considerately. And they're tough because they have a lot of guards in them, the guards are tough, the actual escape plan is complex. The prisons are rebalanced for versus, so that there are fewer guards, you start the game being stronger, the items that you need to escape are available much more plentifully. So you can escape in a single day, and whereas in the single player and co-op game, you can spend days and days and days and days and days playing the game, almost indefinitely, escape whenever you want. In versus, every single player is tasked with escaping within one single day. So you've got a day to bust out, and that's made possible because the prisons are rebalanced. In terms of how does it work, in terms of trolling each other, one of the things that we added in this game is a brand new combat system. So the first game had combat in it, but it wasn't a game, you know, the combat was kind of like more stats based. It was much simpler. There wasn't a real high degree of skill involved.
And you're trying to be stealthy, so it's sort of like last resort, right? Like,
sure.
You didn't actually want to get in a fight if you didn't have to.
In the main game, but in versus, we see combat happen a lot more often because games, instead of taking hours, take more like minutes. It's a much faster turnaround. Kind of like just through the natural interactions of the AI, the NPCs, and all of the systems. Kind of like funny, ridiculous, silly situations completely abound. So for example, I might see you chipping through a wall, you might be happily chipping away through your wall, you might see a guard coming up behind you thinking, well, it's just a guard, it's not another player. Hey ho, that other player has stolen another guard's uniform and is now in disguise as a guard. They run up behind you, whack you on the back of the head with a shovel while you're unconscious. They loot your pockets, take your pickaxe, and think, well, I'll continue with this wall for you, buddy. Don't worry about this. I got you. While you're whisked off to the infirmary to recover, the other person comes along, takes all your items, and performs their escape route. And what's really cool about this game is that we've been balancing it for a long time. We've been getting people outside of the company to come in and play it with us, and we've just been seeing like loads of funny things happen continuously.
Yeah, it sounds like it's sort of a factory for making funny stories. Like
it absolutely is, yeah, because it's so open-ended, because the player plays it however they want to play it. We're seeing kind of strategies and things in it even now, even after we've been all the way through development and spent a lot of time balancing it, that we haven't really even anticipated ourselves.
Yeah, and so multiplayer is the big hook. I want to give you just a couple minutes real quick to say like, what else is new? What else is coming in this one? You mentioned that it's more of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, so it absolutely is. I mean, the first game was a complex game. The first game kind of had some elements to it that you know, it had a lot of elements that actually weren't interactive. I mean, what I'm showing on the screen right now is a case in point. So, for example, the Escapists is an awful lot about collecting items. There's an awful lot about crafting items. I'm looking at the crafting menu right now. You can see the hundreds of different items that you can craft from hundreds of different available constituent parts. In order to craft those items, you need to study. Studying is now a mini game. The prisons are absolutely chock full of different job types, new types of routine, new types of mini games. Here's a nice little thing we can do in co-op. If we want, we can like rock out together in a band. You know, I might play the bongos while you play the guitar, while maybe one of our other buddies kind of like picks up the washboard or maybe plays the kazoo. But I mean, the prisons
so lots of little details.
I mean, yeah, absolutely huge. Yeah. The prisons are just absolutely sprawling and just jam-packed with features and content.
Awesome, awesome. When are people going to be able to actually throw down with their buddies and play it?
So we don't have a final release date just yet. I would say we're absolutely in the final stage of development, putting the final touches to it, polishing and balancing. We are coming soon in 2017. We're coming to all platforms basically, PC on Steam, Xbox One, PS4, and Nintendo Switch also.
Great, great. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Talking to you. And we'll be back with more from the Shacknews booth at E3 2017.